What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Black Rose Podcast. And today is a very, very, very special day for the podcast, okay? Because today is the first day that we have a guest on that's not an internal member of Black Rose Gym. So basically what that means is we've got to we've got a certain standard to deliver. We've got to deliver good quality content. And that is the goal here of the podcast, is to deliver free, valuable, insightful, helpful information to the public, okay? That's the goal, to help people with fat loss, strength, recovery, training, lifestyle, whatever their goal may be, anything health related. That is our job. And I am pleased to be able to do that with you today with a friend of mine, Shane Storey, okay? Shane is pretty much an online coach and a online physique development coach and an online strength coach. Shane is also a nutritionist, and he is also a powerlifter, a competitive powerlifter and a competitive bodybuilder as of, I think, 18 months ago. He hasn't competed in bodybuilding, but he competed on Saturday. So in today's episode, what I want to do is I want to dive into Shane's expertise, because Shane has a lot of information that he's collected over the last, say, 10 to 12 years in the industry. From as long as I can remember, Shane has been in the industry just as long as me. I remember we used to train similarly in the same gym. And Shane has always been on the ball. There's not a time frame that I can remember where Shane wasn't educating himself, training, working towards a goal, executing something. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome him to the podcast and to be able to get him to dive into topics like, if I was getting into powerlifting today, where would I start? What I need to look into. Lessons he's learned along his powerlifting journey, how he prepares not only for his physique development but also for his powerlifting development and competitions, of course, how he manages his online business, how he manages his clients, how he manages to keep consistency. And we're just going to let him talk on topics that we feel that he would be able to bring value to, and I'm going to sit here from a layman's perspective and ask questions. I obviously am going to dive into a little bit more detail, but yeah, we're going to dive straight into it. Shane is on his way, so we're just going to wait, and we're basically just going to start the podcast off straight away. So that brings me to let you know about some things that we have going on. Okay, so over the next coming weeks, we have a number of podcasts lined up with multiple guests. So we're going to dive into topics about females. We're going to dive into previous members to like staff stories, how people transformed their lives incredibly. The podcast has a couple of good episodes lined up, and I literally cannot wait to produce them. We are operating as like a producer / setup. So if anybody sees this and you want to get involved and you have experience with podcasts, shoot up the Black Rose Podcast page or shoot up the Black Rose Gym page and let us know. And we would be super, super, super helpful if there was anyone available who had experience. We want to keep it internal though. We don't want someone to take over it. We like having control over the location. We like having control over different environments. So being able to travel to like this location here. And I would just like to say a massive thank you to Ollie Grimes, who's letting me use his what we call a lounge bar. Okay, because the place I usually rent is not available. So Ollie is a close friend, and he has been ever so kind to let me use his space as a studio. So it's nice. I like the environment. It is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place to go. So if you're in Skerries, make sure to pop down and take a look. There is some great memorabilia in here. Like, we were looking at everything down to tickets that are still on lanyards to TVs and radios, and it's just insane. This place has everything. It is you could literally spend hours in here. It's almost like a museum. So thank you very much for the hospitality. It is fantastic, and obviously we'll repay the favor someday, but thank you very much. I really do appreciate it, and we're going to dive into today's podcast. Yeah, I've already done my introduction and stuff like that, so we can literally just crack on. I was here on my own. I was talking to you, and I was like, I'd done like 3 different introductions of like, I kind of addressed you as like, I don't know how you would see yourself, but I said like a strength and physique like online coach. Yeah. And a competitive kind of powerlifter and bodybuilder. I don't know if you still consider the bodylifting or the bodybuilding still something that you're thinking of.
Oh yeah, like I mean, I will get on stage again eventually, probably 2026. I don't want to get on until I feel I've made decent progress though. You know, because like I did my first season, and the first season is get the experience, you know, see how prep feels like, you know, do you enjoy it? Like, do you like getting up on stage? I definitely did. Yeah. But the next time I do, I don't want it to just be like for experience or just for show. I want to do well. You know,
absolutely.
I'd love to at one point get a WNBF Pro card.
Okay.
Whether that is 2026 or a few years after that, like, you know, that's the ultimate kind of point in the journey that I'll be working towards.
Okay.
Whenever that comes, it comes, because like as natural bodybuilding gets bigger, obviously more talent, more freaks, and you know, I just have to kind of get lucky at one show, win one overall, and then I could have one. But then it's like, what's the goal after that? Then it's like, probably do WNBF Worlds as a pro, and then that's another stepping stone, and then you're against, you know, pro level bodybuilders who, again, everybody who's in the pros are going to be incredible. So that's a completely different ball game, but that could be 5-10 plus years down the road. Who knows?
It's great though that like bodybuilding itself is not a sport that's dictated by age. Do you know, like, because like when I was younger, I played football, and it was so dictated by like, if you weren't a pro by like 22 or 23, you're basically screwed. You're not going to make it. As to where like it's such a not a patience game, but it's just such a long game for us. It's like 5 years to even build a substantial physique. You know,
I think it's kind of like one of the reasons I'm drawn towards that alongside the powerlifting, because I probably know, you know, by the time I'm 40 for sure, I'd say powerlifting is probably going to be capped at that.
Okay.
Just because of, I suppose, how your body's going to adapt to those heavy weights as you get older and older. You know, as you get older, there probably is going to be some increased chance of injury risk potentially, you know, if you're squatting like 300 plus kilos or anything like that. And I think as well, like even with powerlifting, just how demanding it is to as a sport, like week to week, relative to bodybuilding is tough. Like powerlifting training is incredibly tough when you're kind of handling heavy weights every single week, as well as like the long sessions. Like a typical powerlifting session for me is standard 2 hours. Like when I was just competing at the competition I did at the weekend, when I was doing my squats on Sundays, using my knee wraps, I was in the gym for a minimum of 3 hours. And I was probably doing squats, bench, and like an accessory, and that was like 3 hours of minimum workout. You know, so even just like time investment as I get older, like, you know, depends what's in the plans for me as I get older. You know, I need to also factor that in. Whereas like bodybuilding, by the time I get to 40, I would expect to have maxed out the amount of muscle mass I can gain over that time period, and then from there I could probably look at competing more frequently in bodybuilding. Because you know, there's going to be a maximum amount of muscle that you can gain over your lifetime. But then once you get to that point, you could probably just compete more often, you know, and then that's maybe when the pro card kind of era will take place, and I just focus on that.
Absolutely. And I think it's a much like it, I honestly learned a lot from watching your prep a year and a half ago now. Is it a year and a half?
Yeah, it's 2022. It's crazy.
Because we were the environment we were in, even just the gym itself. You know the way sometimes certain gyms will have you'll see certain people kill themselves on the Stairmaster.
Yeah.
I used to tell people, guys, you need to watch Shane's stuff. He's 2 weeks out. He's probably am I right saying no cardio at 2 weeks?
I think I was programmed 2 sessions of 15 minutes a week. And not 15 minutes of HIIT. It was like 15 minutes of Pete on the bike. And I was like, is this even doing that?
I'll never forget, like, even like how like Aaron Howley, like I was like, Howley, me and Howley used to always talk, be like, what story doing? Like, do you know what I mean? And your calories were always super high.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that must be from the accumulation of training and volume and like muscle mass that you have, but just also years of just consistency, because in our like environment it'd be very heavy, and it's not even us coaching it, but it's just people come in 60 minutes on the Stairmaster from week 1, and then they're dead by week 8. Like, do you know what I mean? It's an 8-week prep, and it's, or a 12-week prep. It's getting better. I see like signs of like just even people, members of the gym and members and just other, I see them making better decisions. It's less cardio, it's more about steps, it's more about, you know, food. But yeah, I looked at your prep a year and a half ago, and I was just like, I was amazed by how not easy, because I know it's not easy, but like how low stress in terms of like cardio, your training just probably stayed the same. Food was, I think, did you used to refeed like relatively weekly or bi-weekly?
Yeah, 2 days every weekend.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Food never went to like 1,500 calories?
No,
or?
I think the lowest I got down to was 2,400. You know, it's just good living.
If I still have the screenshot, I don't know if I screenshot it, but he put up his DEXA scan, and the only place you had fat was your feet. Remember I replied to that, and I was like, how the fuck is that even possible?
Yeah, it was my feet and my head. my head contributed to the most, was the amount of body fat I had in my body.
So, you know, what do you put that down to? Anything? Do you put that down to like how you started in, because we all know there's signs of, there's the bad side of prep, and then there's good sides of prep, or there's just good executed preps. Would you put that down to anything, or are you just like 1 in 100, or do you have?
Yeah, it's hard to say really. Like, I think my earliest memories of doing any kind of diet phase, I think my lowest point would have been maybe like 2,000 calories, and that's probably like my very first diet. But then through those kind of phases, I always would have geared towards trying to pace myself as best as possible. Like, I never, thankfully, went down the route of like trying to go through extreme approaches. Purely for the fact that I probably did try 1 or 2 of them, and I just couldn't do them. You know, like I remember the first time I probably tried to actually do a diet, it probably like lasted a week, because I remember some lad was like, I should try like, you know, do no carbs, and I was like, all right, I'll give that a try. And I was just eating like 400 grams of chicken like at each meal, because I wasn't eating vegetables or anything like that. And I didn't know any better, so I was just eating like loads of chicken and like no passing. Like after like a few days, just like, fuck this, like, you know, I can't do this. So I think it's very lucky to stumble upon the likes of 3DMJ very early, and like a lot of what they would have been preaching was very simple. It was like around the time when, you know, flexible dieting, IIFYM were only really coming into the fold, and it's like, yeah, look, you can lose weight while having some, like, you know, treats in your diet, or like, you know, once you're just following these magic numbers, and like, you don't actually have to do like hit cardio if you want to, again, increase your energy expenditure to lose body fat. Like, you could just do steps, and like a lot of that stuff was kind of going against what would have been their way to do things for bodybuilders. And I'm kind of glad I latched onto that, because like probably part of me is like, I wanted a kind of easy way out of doing things, but also just because it's easy doesn't mean you can't still get results from it. And I think that's like one thing that probably people miss out on, is like, you don't necessarily need to make things hard straight away. Like, make things as easy as possible until you need to make them hard, right?
Absolutely.
Especially for people who are like beginners in the gym. Like, why change so much of what your life is like on a daily basis to fit into this thing that's like so foreign to you? Like, how do you think that's going to set you up for success? You know, if it's just like a case of like just adjusting one behavior in your day, and that could get you to move forward, like, surely that's the easy way to do it, right? And then over time you build confidence with that behavior, whether it's, you know, doing an extra 1,000 steps a day, or, you know, adding a vegetable into your diet, and then you get confident with that, it becomes part of your routine, and then you can look to level up the next thing.
Absolutely.
So I think like over time I kind of gathered a lot of those habits, behaviors, and it just meant that like when I jumped into a prep, like I'd done fucking loads of diets. At that point, I knew what it felt like to be hungry. I knew what it felt like to manage hunger with regards to like picking different food choices, or even just being able to just kind of suck it up and kind of navigate life when you're hungry. You know, planning your day to kind of fit in the extra activity and stuff like that. So when it did roll around, it was pretty handy. Like obviously the calories were higher than some people would get to, but as you said there, like relatively, it's still hard. It's still a drain. It's still something that you're really trying to commit to on a daily basis. But I think just the practice and all the years of habit building leading up to it did make it, you know, relatively manageable.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say there was any kind of specific thing that was like kind of unique to why I was able to kind of prep on low amounts of cardio or high amounts of food. Like, you know, I've got a guy who's competing this year, and he's kind of the same. Like, he did a photo shoot last year that wasn't with myself, but he's telling me about his experience, and he got shredded without doing any cardio at all, while keeping his calories like, you know, close to 3,000.
Okay.
Just some people are out there, you know, like that, but then other people will need to suffer. Like, who was I listening to recently? I was listening to, I don't know if you follow like Samson Dowda, like the guy. Yeah. I think I was watching some of his videos of his like Arnold prep, and like he was like eating very close to 1,000 calories. You know, and somebody who is, you know, 290 pounds on stage, you know, that like that doesn't make sense.
No.
And then you have, you know, then you'll have people who are like half the size from like, oh, I don't know why I have to go below 2,000 calories to lose weight. It's like, it doesn't. You don't need to really know why you need to go below, but maybe that's just what you need to do, and like, is that fair? Like,
because I was watching the Chris Bumstead and Jordan Peterson podcast, and he said his calories go as low as 1,200. Chris Bumstead for his Olympia prep. So I was like, okay, you know, and maybe that's again just, you know, what he needs to do, or maybe it's something Hammy Rambod is doing to try, you know, because he seems to be producing, you know, winners all the time. Maybe I was trying to do the maths, because he said he never reduced his protein below 300. Yeah. So 300 by 4 is 1,200. I was wondering, like,
it's protein only.
Yeah. Like, for now, he only said for such a short period of time, but he was trying. Jordan Peterson was being the novice in the podcast, and he was trying to understand why there was such a big discrepancy between fat loss or his peak. Sorry, not his peak. His competitive weight versus his off-season weight. He couldn't understand why he would do that. Do you know? So no, but like, I seen your prep last year or 18 months ago, and I was like, it really resonated with me, and it was actually probably one of the turning points to make me start to make healthier, better decisions, because it was, I don't recall seeing on my feed people pushing a lower, I think maybe that's just the Irish kind of mentality. It's like dig. It's not everybody, but you were very much the opposite way. You were very much not pushing anything in particular. You were just saying, this is what I'm doing, this is what's working. And I kind of was like, I need to get back to that, because that's literally around the same time. We'd be the same age. I'm 29, you're 30. So around the same time, it's literally what I grew up on, was if it fits your macros, flexible dieting, all that stuff. And I used to remember being able to diet on 350 grams of carbs and be like dropping weight like weekly, you know, measuring like 1% of my body weight, just pulling it off weekly, trying to retain as much muscle mass as possible. That was always the first thing in my head. Then when I set up the business in the gym, I think it was 24, and everything just went out the window after that. I was just like eating chicken fillet rolls some weeks, and like the routine of everything I built from like say 18 to 24 for whatever reason. Because I just thought having a gym would be like cool. I thought it was the next progression as like a PT, you know. I never thought of like business, and like, you know, as you get older you start to like have customer service and all this stuff, and became very stressful. Yeah,
and the stress of business, all right.
So like, there's parts of me that wish, like, obviously I would never change anything, but there's parts of me that wish I had waited like 2 more years until I matured. It was just that little bit too early, because when I look back, I was 23 when I started, and then 24 when I took the building over. We actually opened 2 days after my 24th birthday, which now looking back, I was a kid. Like, I don't even to me, like, 24 is so young now, do you know? But like, I was not immature, but I was just I was so much maturer training wise, but immature in terms of like, I was only kind of figuring stuff out from like, the business has definitely taught me a lot more about like, just like, I was always super high stress. I'd be like, I have to progress, you know, my training I have to be like having a goal to like go to the Olympia or like go to like the Arnold's. Like, that was the way I was thinking. I was just so like, I don't know, 21, 22, 23. had to have a gym, had to do all this. And now I just realised I just want time back. I just want people to leave me alone and just be, you know what I mean, to be able to go to the gym, get my training in uninterrupted, go and eat and just enjoy the small things in life. You know, I don't want any of that stuff anymore that I originally thought I wanted back in the day. But yeah, I remember back in the day, because you started training in Platinum, didn't you? Yeah. So I would, you know, pop down there every now and again. And I remember you back, geez, that must be 7, 8, 9 years ago now.
Yeah, probably.
And I always remember you were always in shape. I don't remember not seeing you in shape. So like obviously consistency for people who are starting to prep, you started probably from a very, like, unintentionally, you probably bulked up, intentional, but like, you know, you didn't start out at 19 probably wanting to compete, or did you? Or
oh no, I didn't think I'd ever compete in bodybuilding, to be honest.
Yeah,
it was only my first season was when I was 28.
Yeah,
and I've been training in some capacity since I was 15. And I probably, at that time when you see me, I was probably starting to get like semi kind of serious, or getting a little bit kind of more in the know about different ways of kind of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like one of the kind of big things, I suppose, I think I would have picked up from like 3DMJ. I think those more flexible approaches, it makes getting in shape and the gym and, you know, getting jacked like less exclusive and more like everybody can do this within these kind of certain kind of guidelines, right? Which I think is important because, you know, to the general population, you know, you've probably met some people who are like, I need to get back to training, but I need to wait until X time till I'm focused. Whereas, like, you know, even if they are just putting in the minimum amount of effort, probably like training 3 days a week or something like that, and even just like tracking their protein intake, they probably get pretty decent results. Will they maximize the progress? No, but they'll probably still make progress, which is important. I think that was like one big thing for me, especially when I started out kind of figuring out what are the kind of main things that I really need to focus on for getting results. Biggest thing was just adherence. Like, you know, like, am I following a training setup that I enjoy, that, like, you know, is making me want to get to the gym? Have I got lifts on my training days which are like exciting me, ones that I want to push? You know, say for example, one of the reasons I'm drawing powerlifting is because I have like the squat, bench, deadlift that I can just focus on and benchmark my progress on. I can kind of tailor my program around those lifts, and then use those as kind of indicator lifts for how is the rest of my training progressing.
Yeah. And
then off the back of that, you know, from there you're like, okay, well, so outside of the training now, how do I go about my nutrition? It's like, okay, do I want to gain muscle? Do I want to diet? Like, you know, and then you're just like, okay, well, and then from here, once I have that like kind of goal set, how do I adjust my calories? And then you just kind of set, okay, the calorie target, the protein target, and then I'm following these kind of macro ranges there. So, and now I have a little bit more flexibility with my food choices, kind of promote a little bit better adherence, because I can still have some nice foods with my diet where I haven't give everything up. And just even those kind of even that small little bit of flexibility does make it so much easier to be consistent with, because you're not like, I have to do X, Y, and Z or else I can't progress, or this is all a waste of time. You know, it's at the end of the day, if you can show up every single week for years, you're gonna do much better than the person who is perfect for like a month or 3 months of the year and then fucks off for the rest of the year, you know?
And I think we both know perfection is impossible. Like, there's no such, like, you can't have the perfect I've spent years trying to perfect training plans, you know, nutritional plans around time and around everything, around work. I'll get up at this time, maximizing, like, you know, like when I started the business, maximizing, like, trying to have the most amount of energy to be able to train and do it. Like, it's just not possible. And it is what you said there, the adherence is the number one most important thing. If you can just adhere to something, as long as, like, have you ever do you ever remember a time where, like, you fell out of training within the last couple of years or 10 years, or like went more than a month without training?
Oh, probably the last time was actually, like, I feel like as inconsistent was, like, I was on a J1 when I was in college when I was like 21.
Yeah.
It was 9 years ago, like, you know.
And you were probably still somewhat consistent.
I was like, I had a membership to a gym that was around the corner for me, but, like, you know, at the time it was like a J1. It's kind of just you're partying with your friends all the time and working mad hours, and but outside of that is pretty much no. It's like a habit. It's like brushing my teeth. Like, if I forgot to brush my teeth, I'd feel really weird for the day. And it's the exact same if I don't go to the gym, you know. It's just something I do purely out of enjoyment to like push myself. Like I've always been involved in sports, so being involved in sports, you're always you're kind of taught how to work hard, you know, and you're kind of taught to almost kind of like just enjoy, even just like the like showing up to the gym and kind of making some kind of friends within the gym, people that you see, you know, and that like even itself can be a little bit of a kind of motivator to get there. You know, that little bit of kind of sense of community, which is really important as you get older. Like as you get older, like you don't see maybe your friends that you had in college or school as much as you once did. So, you know, going to the gym and having that kind of little kind of bit of community is super important. Like I definitely find.
When you started training, because I want to touch on more of the powerlifting aspect of kind of your journey, because when you started powerlifting, I feel like, because we were talking a little bit about Ben, and we were saying how he was a member of Lusk, and you know I done my course with Image, and Abs was like in Glasnevin at the time, and like how does one get into powerlifting, like back then? Like, do you just follow your, like, do you literally just stumble across it online and then just go, this is my training, and you look up? Because I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, this strength sensei,
Charles Poliquin,
he would have been where I would have been getting my strength based stuff from. And then there was a guy, a Russian, Dmitry Koklov.
Klokov,
I used to follow him and just see him do crazy like snatches, and like he was very like Olympic lifting as well. Some of the stuff I would copy. So I'm just wondering, like, I would have followed a Wendler 531 method before, just for a number of weeks, but like how did you get so like big into it? Like, where did it start? Because you know, obviously Platinum isn't a massive powerlifting gym. Not that there's not powerlifters there, because I remember, I think Killy might have been there at the time. He could have been into powerlifting. I remember I trained with him once. But yeah, how did you get into powerlifting? And
I remember when I first kind of stumbled upon powerlifting as like a sport, there was like a load of lads in Pro Fitness in Balbriggan. Do you remember that? It was like above the community hall.
No.
There's like a guy who used to go to my school, John Carroll, who owned it.
Oh, I know John. Yeah. We actually do jiu-jitsu together.
Oh, okay. There you go. Yeah. So I remember following him on Facebook at the time, because Instagram didn't exist, and he was putting up like videos of him at a competition with another guy, and even Eamon Harford, who competed competition that did this weekend. Like, you know, he was like doing strongman and stuff down there, and like it just seemed like at the time like super fringe, which powerlifting still is fringe, but it's like more popular now. Of course, like it's way more common to see people powerlifting in the gym, but it seemed like so fringe then. I was like, that's amazing. Like, I'd love to do that at some point, but I've no idea how to get involved. And you know, naturally enough, at the time I wasn't working or anything like that. I was broke, so I was like, okay, I'd probably just had to kind of park this for a while. And remember hearing more about it on podcasts, and I like the idea of there being certain standards to it. Like bodybuilding, you know, you can look at somebody's physique, like that's amazing, but you don't know like where you stand relative to it, and you probably never will, because like your shape, genetics, all that can be so completely off. Like, even you look at the likes of, you know, the Mr. Olympia competition, they all look amazing, but they all look different types of amazing. But there's no like qualifying standard or so, right? There's no like standard to be like, if I get to that, I know I'm kind of on equal kind of footing to these people. Whereas like I heard of the concept of like Wilks or DOTS now, which is a more kind of the more kind of pervasive coefficient that they use to compare people in different weight classes against each other.
Yes.
So the kind of strength to body weight ratio, essentially.
So like, taking, for example, if I'm 100 kilos and my total is 700, that would produce a DOT score. And if someone's 70 but their total is 350, that would produce a DOT score. Yeah. But whoever has the highest dots would actually be the stronger individual.
Yeah. So it's something to like kind of give you some kind of thing to kind of essentially kind of set a standard of.
Yeah. Okay. Like, you know? Yeah.
So like at the time, like 400 Wilks was like the kind of, was a pretty good standard to aim towards. So I was like, I like to kind of aim towards that, and kind of worked it out what type of lifts I'd have to get for like my body weight, And that kind of just gave me some kind of target to work towards for my training. I remember I was following some powerlifters on Instagram, so I followed Bryce Lewis's coaching company, which are called the Strength Athlete, and they had like a free program on their website. Downloaded that. Also went on to Greg Knuckles' website, Stronger by Science, and even if you do that to this day, you put in your email and you get sent 28 free programs. And like the 28 free programs, it's actually amazing because it gives you like beginner, intermediate, advanced for all squat, bench, deadlift. So you have like loads of different combinations of like lots of different programs you can put together. So that kind of gave me an idea as to how to like maybe kind of look at program for strength, but also just gave me something to actually follow, you know, because like the Strength Athlete one was pretty much week 1 to week 8. Week 8 you're gonna max out and test. So we just kind of follow that, and yeah, as time went on, just continued kind of repeating those programs and kind of adjusting it based off like, you know, my other kind of side goals like body composition. And then I remember I was working in FlyFit at the time, and one of the guys was organising a deadlift competition for charity. So I started preparing for that. Did that with a few other PTs, and one of the guy who's doing the DJing, AJ, he was a member of ABS, and he's like, oh, you should come down to the gym. It'd be good to have you. Like, you know, Jay's always looking to get people to come to train at the gym, like to start competing. So got in contact with Jay, and Jay asked me to come down, and that was kind of that. Then I was hooked into the cult of abs.
Yeah, I remember I was there, and we thought it was the coolest place ever when it was in Glasnevin. I don't know. I've not been down in the new place. But when we went in, it was like everyone was like, "This is so," because it wasn't like a gym. Like, it was a gym, but it wasn't like a commercial gym. It had everything that every other gym didn't have and was set up. I remember we all went in and we were like, this is so cool. From a practical, like, customer consumer point of view, you know, you'd walk in there, you wouldn't know, you know, what do I do with bars or whatever. Like, there was no treadmills, there was no nothing. It was just all weights. So we were literally like all amazed. But my only like previous little powerlifting experience was Wendler 531. I'll never forget, like, I was just obsessed with getting stronger. I think I ran it for about 12 or 16 weeks, and then that was, you know, the end of it. I was like gaining weight, and I was like, I have to cut back on this. How do you find actually the weight gain and like powerlifting? I find, like, in my experience, and even from seeing, like, there's a lot of younger powerlifters now. Powerlifting is massive now in that kind of 16 to kind of like 21, I would say. I don't know if you see that more in the club and stuff like that, but they're all just consuming as much food as possible. Like Lucozade, everything from like just calories. There's a young lad in the gym, and like he's only 17, and he's gone from, I think he joined, I'd say about a year ago, he's gone from about 150 kilo deadlift to 210 deadlift in the last like year.
Unreal.
And he's like gained like 15 kilos, and he's on like 17. And then there's another lad who's like a 230 deadlift, and he's only like 17 as well. But how do you find, like, because from my personal experience, I found that like more food was helping me get stronger. So I was just eating more all the time, and I put on a lot of weight because of that. And I was like, I justified in my head that it was okay to be 110 kilos. I think that was the heaviest I got, was like 107. But like, I wasn't in shape. I was like dirty bulking. Obviously you would do that now clean, but did you ever find that to be a thing, or even with clients or with people in the space, that like it's just a matter of food going down the hatch to get stronger?
I think there is a bit of a shift in powerlifting like now, because people are more so looking at, you know, the powerlifters on Instagram who have great body composition as well as like are really strong, and the most popular weight classes are realistically like going to be like the middleweights. So for like guys, going to be like between 74s to 105s. For females, it's probably going to be between like the 63s to 76s. So like those would probably be like the most like populated weight classes, because what most people are going to fit into, like between 74 kilos to 105 kilos, like it describes pretty much most guys, right? So and then as well, I think a lot of people do obviously see the likes of, you know, the kind of good physiques that can come out of powerlifting. So they're a little bit more mindful. I think there's not as many people populating like the higher weight classes, especially in like the male side of the sport anymore, because I don't necessarily think people are as willing to get as huge, because of as well now we know that like being that heavy is probably not the best for your long-term health. So I think when it does come to younger people getting into the sport, I don't necessarily think there's much of an issue with them pushing their food or being a little bit more kind of flexible, or like almost like kind of like doing dirty bulks kind of stuff, right? Because I think of myself when I was that age, like, you know, somebody at that, like, told me at that age that, like, you know, I had to be a little bit more kind of strict to my nutrition, eat a little bit cleaner food, probably would tell them to fuck off. You know, because like, especially as the young male brain, right? Like we think we know more than we do, and like we think we know best. Like, you know, we could have somebody who's been through it all, way more experienced than you, and they can tell you exactly what you need to avoid, and you'll be like, yeah, it didn't work for you, old man, but it's probably gonna work for me, right? So like, you know, I think you need to kind of find your own kind of way and kind of make those mistakes, because they're kind of, to a degree, like rites of passage. I think anybody who has gained a decent amount of muscle in their time is probably going to tell you some story of when they have like dirty bulked, or like, you know, gained a decent amount of strength, has done some like crazy high volume ridiculous like training program. They're just kind of like rites of passage, because like you learn lessons through experience versus just reading in a book, right? You can read like all the fucking papers that you want and all of like, you know, the Instagram posts you want on, like, you know, appropriate rates of weight gain, but until you actually kind of apply them yourself, like, it's kind of hard to really kind of understand the trade-offs, the pros, cons, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, having said that, to kind of answer your question, I do think there is more of a shift in powerlifting towards managing nutrition better and kind of knuckling down on the recovery variables more, because of how big this sport is growing and because other people are doing it too. Right, back in the day, you used to just be, you show up to the gym, you lift your weights, and that's it. Whereas like now, you know, there's more nutritionists in the space, more like people looking at like the likes of like managing sleep, managing stress. So if you're competing at a top level, you're going to be competing against a person who is not only extremely talented, but they're also doing all that stuff too. So if you're not kind of looking at that, like, you're probably not maximizing how strong you could potentially get over the long run. And then even with that, like, you know, if you look at the middleweight weight classes, if you have, you know, 20% body fat versus the guy who like is, you know, a little bit under weight cap, but is taking a little bit more of a slower approach with gaining their body weight, they're probably going to gain a little bit more muscle tissue, a little bit more contractile tissue, which can actually improve their actual performance in the sport. That's not like kind of dead weight. And, you know, over time they could potentially get much better than that person who's has a little bit more body fat than they might need for their weight class, you know. So yeah, I think it's definitely improved a lot.
Do you find that weight correlates to strength from your experience? Like, if you gain 5 kilos of mass, you are stronger? Or do you see that as like a thing for everybody, like that obviously mass moves mass? Because I remember, like, I felt I could just even hold so much more weight when I was 100 kilos versus when I was 80 kilos. So like for me, I just felt probably within 6 to 8 to 9 weeks, I felt like if I gained 5 kilos, I'm just trying to think back because I was only like 18 or 19 at the time, I felt like incredibly stronger compared to where I was. So in the start, I think you're right in what you're saying is like you almost have to, you know, take it as far as you can, get that kind of beginner or that maximize whatever progress, because there is some progress there to be made. But then obviously you don't want to let that go too far. You don't want to see any negative downsides to the actual, you know, weight gain. But do you find yourself, like, if you were to drop, I don't know, what weight did you compete at on the weekend?
I was 96. And then, like, do you make weight for that, or do you? I did do a weight cut. However, I didn't drop as much as I planned to, but that's just down to some error on my part. Okay.
And then, like, would you feel stronger at 96 versus where you wanted to go? As in, like, does that with decrease in mass make a difference in terms of how strong you are?
So I suppose it depends on how you are going about the cut. So, you know, that week I did an acute weight cut, so just essentially manipulating body water and glycogen and stomach content. So with a cut like that, especially with the kind of refeeding period of like 24 hours, shouldn't have really much impact to performance as such. But if you were doing if you're actually doing a diet where you're like manipulating your body fat levels, that might have a greater impact to your performance, because now you're eating into your recovery that you could have for your training sessions leading into that competition, right? And then as well, you're also having to deal with changes in potentially your leverages, how your belt feels, how the bar is going to feel your back. All of these things can impact how strong you feel in the day. Because say, for example, like a very common thing for people to get when they're kind of adjusting their body composition in powerlifting is just their belt going in between two holes. And you know, if you're used to having it on a certain setting for squats, and then you like all of a sudden on the day you're like, this doesn't feel quite as right, and like the one down feels a little bit too loose. You're like, you start getting your head, you know. But your brace has now kind of changed as well. So like a lot of these things can impact like how you're going to perform in the day. So yeah, it's it is kind of tough one. Like we're all going to have different weights where we perform our best at, and then once we kind of dip below them, we're gonna have a negative impact on our performance happen. Like for me, like when I was doing my bodybuilding prep, for example, I didn't notice really any performance detriments until I went below 90 kilos. You know, but you know, after that it was pretty much it crashed hard after that.
Were you still squatting, benching and deadlifting through bodybuilding prep? I
stopped benching after 3 or 4 months because it was depressing. I have long arms, so like bench press is never going to be a strong suit for me. So you know, once that started to tank, I was like, you know what, I'm not really getting much out of this for my bodybuilding goals. So I kept squatting and deadlifting, and they went fine until I stopped doing them. You know, then when I stopped doing them, like the skill just degraded very quickly.
And how did you find transitioning from like powerlifter to bodybuilder back to powerlifter? Because you were powerlifting more times before your first show. So how did you find that transition? You know, going from like one powerlifting to bodybuilding, and then obviously posing and that experience, etc., etc. And then obviously I think naturally you probably progress because you're going to go into an off season anyway after you finished prep, and then naturally you go back to your roots in terms of just training, and then the fun is. Am I right in saying the powerlifting is the fun part?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And it keeps the training just focused, and it's like you said, it's the environment, it's the all of the things. So more actually, how did you find going from powerlifting to bodybuilding? How did that transition for you? Like, did you find that tough, or was that just smooth?
I think the thing I probably found the toughest was going from training with a big group of people like I was in abs to just training by myself a lot. Like, because like when I was training abs, for example, like there was always a good crew of us training together, and that was great. Whereas like bodybuilding, had to have that kind of shift in focus. My program was now changing, and as well, just over time when you're kind of going into prep, you just kind of want to get in and out of the gym. So I definitely found that challenging. I didn't really kind of mind the kind of switch in training as much, because I just like hit a massive goal with powerlifting. Like I just total 700, which was like a huge total that I wanted to work towards for like years. And I knew like the next big milestone was going to be in another few years away. So I didn't mind like having that little bit of a pivot, because it stopped me, I suppose, getting frustrated at how far that journey, like after hitting 700, was going to be, as well as just give me some kind of little bit of excitement towards a new experience. I was kind of ready to start kind of dialing things in and really kind of pushing the boat on like getting as lean as I could, and kind of having this like great experience of, eventually getting up on the bodybuilding stage, because it was so different to everything I've been doing up until that point. And I think at that point as well, I was very much ready to do a bodybuilding competition, because I didn't want to do a bodybuilding competition until I felt like I had enough muscle mass for it to be worth it for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't find actually the transition all that bad. I think probably the transition back from bodybuilding to powerlifting was a little bit more challenging. Just because I was trying to get incorporate the powerlifts again, because I had probably 9 or 10 weeks where I wasn't doing any of them. And I remember the first squat session I did after I finished prep, and I squat like 140 for 5, and like that, like I think maybe 3 weeks out from my first show, I was able to do like 200 for 5. So it's, and like I felt like Bambi on ice, like, and even like I remember I did bench press for the first time for like almost like 4 or 5 months, I think I could barely like manage like 90 for a set of 5, and I was like, my best was like 140 for 5 at the time. So it's like, what is going on here? It felt so weird. But like, you know, as body fat came on, it became a little bit easier. But then as well as powerlifting in a different environment, I was living in Canada and trying to get like used to that, kind of training around different crews and stuff like that. So it did take a little bit of time to get myself back in the flow of powerlifting again. But I think once I kind of got myself back up 90 kilos plus, I started to find my feet again.
You were saying there your squat went to did you say 140 for 5? And then on the weekend, am I right in saying you done the 280 squat? First 5 plate squat?
Yeah.
First 5 plate. So congrats, because, you know, from what, how long ago was that? So that was 18 months ago. So that's nearly, that's double. Well, not for 5 reps, but.
Oh yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah, well, yeah, it's double the weight in my back.
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah.
Which is true. Yeah, I suppose when you look at it that way, I finished prep in November 2022. So yeah, about 18 months or so, just a little bit less.
And how do you find? Because I want to dive into more of like maybe the Irish powerlifting scene, but also you mentioned there you were in Canada for a year. Was it a year you were there for?
Yes.
A year. How do you find, like, I suppose a couple of questions. How does the powerlifting scene, for someone looking to get into powerlifting, like say like brand new, walking into any local gym, because there's not that many powerlifting dedicated gyms in the country, so that you either have to drive or, you know, trek, you know, an hour or so to gyms. How does the powerlifting scene work in terms of like just joining gyms, and then how does the competition setting, so someone who's looking to compete over say 4 or 5 years, what does that like hierarchy look like? You go in, for example, I just recently joined jiu-jitsu 2 years ago, and you go in at a grass level through competition, and then there's like the IBJJF, and they do so on and so on, and it's very hard to understand what do I do when you're brand new to something. It's like, where do I go? And I find sometimes once you know the steps, kind of everything else just gets out of the way. I don't know if you've ever.
Once you're in it, you're kind of in it. Like,
you kind of just know where to go, like, you know.
Yeah.
But sometimes when there's decisions to be made, and you're like, do I join this gym? Do I join that gym? Can I do this? Can I do that? What program should I be on, etc. So I suppose to all of that, like, how does someone start?
So in Ireland, there is currently 2 drug tested federations. So the biggest one is the Irish PF. They're affiliated to the IPF, which is like the international body. And with the Irish PF, like, that's going to have, over the last few years, over since it started, it's had the best of the best powerlifters like competing there. And if you want to compete for Ireland, like internationally, that is like the best way to do it, because that's where the best of the best will compete at like IPF Worlds. And even now there's like the Sheffield event, which like you'll have to win Worlds in your weight class to actually get an invite to. But if you're looking to just get started in it now, you have the Irish PF, as I just mentioned there. You have USAPL Ireland, which is a new federation that's just after starting in Ireland this year, and they're going to have like multiple different open events throughout the year. And then you have the AB Series, which is the competition that I just did over the weekend, and that is run slightly differently. So the USAPL and Irish PF, you have weight classes that you'll have to compete in. They'll have open events throughout the year, but then they'll have some invite-only events, right? So I have invite-only events like Irish PF Nationals. So you have to, like, you know, get top 7 in your weight class, top 7 total in your weight class across the year, and then you'll receive an invite. You'll have other things like the Christmas qualifier event as well, which is usually to get it's not necessarily to qualify for nationals, but it is invite only meet that they'll extend to people who are close enough to qualifying for like the international standard, for example, to compete against each other. So it's kind of like a mini nationals as such. And then outside that, you have lots of regional events. So you'll have like the likes of like ones that are be Leinster, ones in like Connacht, Ulster, all that kind of stuff, which will serve as qualifiers to get to Irish PF nationals. Then with that, you do have to compete in weight classes, but there's no distinguishing between, you know, a beginner lifter to an advanced lifter in that. So you could have somebody who's looking to qualify for nationals, or somebody who's looking to do their exact same their first meet in the exact same event, in the exact same weight class. Now, if you compare that to like the ab series runs differently. So the ab series doesn't have weight classes. The ab series has divisions. So you have like division 2, which is 399 dots or below. So dots being like the coefficient that's like relative to your body weight. And then above that, there's division 1, which is like 400 dots to 459. Then you have the pro am, which is 460 dots and more. And then you have the pro or invite only meets, which are typically, you have to have like a 900 kilo total or 525 dots. And they are pretty much like, you just have to get invited to them. So the ab series, I think, is probably like one of the best ones to do if you're a beginner powerlifter, because number one, you don't have to fit into any kind of weight class. Number two, you're going to be competing against people who are of a similar level to you, who have maybe never competed before or haven't reached that 400 dots just yet. As well, you don't have to buy a federation fee, so you can just go in and, you know, compete. Just buy the ticket. There's no approved list of equipment that you need to be wearing on the platform, like there will be with IPF. Like IPF, you need to have like an equipment check done before you step on the platform. As well as that, they're phenomenally run. Like, you know, you get a really good experience at the actual competition. They're nice and efficient, and yeah, I think I always push my lifters to go towards those because of how well they're ran and just how fun they are to compete at. Sometimes you go to, in the past, some RSPF competitions have been like said by many to be a little bit sterile, but that'd be more kind of towards the international events versus domestic ones. In Ireland, the powerlifting scene is so small that like at USAPL event, RSPF event, ab series event, it's pretty much all the same people. Like, you know, everybody's going to be the exact same, but you will have people who will stick to one or the other. Now, I don't really have that kind of mindset for myself personally. I'm going to compete where I want to compete, when I want to compete, if I can. There is certain kind of aspects you need to take into consideration if you are going to compete with the IRSPF or the IPF, however, because they do have, they have this part in their kind of T's and C's, I suppose you could call it, called Article 14. Article 14 essentially means that if you compete with them, you can't compete in another federation if you want to compete at a national level event or internationally. So, you know, if that's your kind of problem, you know, you're probably competing at a very high level. So that's fine. But if you're a beginner powerlifter, it does kind of create this like barrier to entry to do more competitions, right? Okay. So like, you know, if somebody's just doing their first competition and then they sign up for the IPF or the RSPF, I haven't heard of anybody getting like this enforced in Ireland just yet, but it is enforced like in like the US and Canada, for example, and in Great Britain. But, you know, imagine getting a letter from the RSPF being like, sorry, like, you know, whoever you are after doing your first meet, but you can't compete in like these other federations, or else you're banned from us for like the next 12 months. Like, it would be it's a little bit extreme for something that's as small as powerlifting. There's no need to be setting up these like further barriers to participation, right? Like, ultimately, I think we're all looking to go towards the same thing. I understand maybe they want to kind of safeguard their high level athletes from going to different federations and maybe kind of sticking with them, and, you know, it's just like the Premier League will try to keep some of their top players, right? But at the same time, for the lower level guys, you know, I don't really see the point of enforcing something like that, or kind of creating, again, more barriers to like entry for people.
Yeah, that makes sense, because it's kind of like if we were to do the bodybuilding aspect, it's like if you compete in a PCA show, you can only compete in PCA shows then for the remainder of your prep, or remainder of your competitive career. And like sometimes just the experience, different stages, just different people, you know, it's part of meeting the people in the sport as well. So so like if I think back, like I never had aspirations to compete in powerlifting, but I never knew, like, for example, if I'm someone who's just in a gym and I want to compete, do I have to be a member of, like, say, abs or a powerlifting gym, or do I have to have a coach, or can I just register for these events myself, train myself and walk up and, like, you know, like you would have got wrapped and you would have got like all these things, like, do you need all of that stuff, or like can you literally just show up on, like, is there people that just show up on the day and they've like their mom and dad with them, or their cousin or brother, and they literally go out and squat, bench and deadlift? Like, yeah,
for sure. Like, again, like, that's one of the good things about, you know, competing in something like the ab series, for example. Like, or like even the Irish PF, like you don't necessarily need to have like a coach or be affiliated with a club. Like you can just show up on the day once you've got your ticket paid for,
Okay.
and you know, register a total.
Yeah.
You know, so some people do that. Sure, like my clients, for example, they wouldn't be registered as like a club. Like we wouldn't be registered as like powerlifting club in Ireland, but like you know, they would still be able to go in there and kind of do their events. And even if I'm not able to be with them at competitions, like they can still have a good day. Like, you know, generally people will have like a handler with them. So the handler, essentially the role of the handler on the day is to kind of reduce any work that the athlete has to do in the day, apart from just stepping on the platform and lifting.
Yeah.
So like that person will like put in their attempt selections for them. They might, like, you know, like, yes, the other day when I was handling my athlete, was just holding her phone and her earphones while she's gone out for a squat.
Yeah.
And say for example, when I was getting my friend Lawrence to handle me the other day, he's wrapping my knees. So, you know, if you have somebody there to help you with that, like, that's obviously a benefit.
Yeah.
But there are people who just go by themselves, and that's completely fine as well. Like, some people like will do that and they'll get on just fine.
Okay. Because in the beginning, I'll never forget, I done my first jiu-jitsu comp, and with, like, similar to the way I described it there, I registered for a grassroots comp and didn't know how it worked. The guys in the club told me this was the website that you registered. I thought the club was going to be there as well because I registered automatically. So I expected someone to be there. I go down and there's nobody there, and I'm like trying to have to figure it all out on my own. But like, I remember that just being like, I know everyone had a corner. Like, for example, their coach was in the corner, and they were like helping them, guiding them, left hand here, right hand here, and I'm just literally on my own while I'm trying to figure everything out. So I remember how intimidating that was, going down there and you walk in, you're like, oh, I'm here for the competition and all that kind of stuff. So I would imagine, obviously being associated with abs, you'd know everything that goes on. You'd obviously know, you know, everyone that's there. You'd walk in, but if you weren't associated with abs, it could be a little bit harder for someone to potentially walk in the door and say, you know, here I am, this is what I'm gonna what do I do? You know what I mean? Like,
it definitely makes your life a lot easier as somebody who's like doing the sport or competing, if you do have a coach who's kind of guided you through this experience, because there's lots of things that people will do at first meet that, you know, if they had a little bit of guidance on, they could avoid some easy mistakes, you know. Like, I even remember, like, one of my first clients that I got to compete in a powerlifting competition, we were discussing a few weeks beforehand, like, you know, what attempts he's going to make. And he was like, he just assumed that on every attempt he would max out. And, like, I was like, no, like, you know, like, if you max out on every attempt, you are going to be absolutely crippled by the time you get to deadlifts. Like, you know, like, your final attempt, that's the one that you're probably going to max out on. The other two, they're kind of building you up to that max attempt, right? Okay. So, like, the kind of third is the one where you're kind of like trying to set that PB or PR, but the other ones, you're trying to pace yourself. You're trying to get your number on the board, because if you don't get, like, if you miss one lift, if you miss your opener, for example, right, the best thing that you should do is to repeat that opener. It's not to go up and weight, which is kind of beginner error. Beginner error would be, oh, well, like, you know, I just missed the command, or, like, you know, it moved fine, but I just kind of missed this, like, one small thing, like, maybe I just cut depth slightly. But then you go out for your second attempt, and now you're nervous because you're like, oh, if I don't get this one, I can't go for I'm probably not going to go for my third one, or, you know, maybe just a little bit more anxious about getting a number now. And you know, you could miss out on the same technicality. It could be like you miss a down command or something, and just that little bit of added pressure, or if you were misguided and went up from your opening attempt and ended up missing it, you know, you could bomb out the competition, and then your first competition, you know, is kind of ruined because maybe you didn't have this little bit of kind of small bit of guidance beforehand, which could easily save your day.
Okay, I never thought of it like that. So, like, when you were competing on the weekend, your first lift wasn't a lift you hadn't lifted before?
Oh, I'd done that lift many times.
Okay, because like, you're confident going in, and you've done that hundreds of times, and you're like, this is... And the only lift that you probably haven't attempted before was your third one?
Yes.
Okay, so you're, like, you do a small increment between 1 and 2, and then you kind of PB on 3. Am I right in saying you don't count, have you PB'd in the gym, but you don't count that when you talk, you don't count that as a like if you hit a 300 deadlift, it's not you don't get it? Am I right in saying?
Yeah. It's, I suppose once you start competing, you don't really count gym lifts
Okay.
as much anymore. You know,
Okay.
like you'll see people on their Instagram bio, they'll put in like their powerlifting total, and
Yeah.
then they'll put in their gym total. It's like it doesn't really matter. Like, you know, like nobody's counting that.
Okay. And that's just down to like there's just it will skew up the powerlifting probably comp on the day. If you the environment, the setting, the plates might not be the same. There's sometimes I pick up my sevens in the gym, and they're smaller than the eights. Sorry, no, they're bigger than the six. Whatever way, they're smaller than the sixes, but they say seven on them. There's no way these are sevens.
Yeah,
It's just an irregular pair. But that can be down to like different bars, different, weights. Some people could use a lighter bar, so you just don't count any of it. Obviously, if you have a powerlifting gym, you're gonna have your calibrated plates, you're gonna have your bars, and everything's gonna be the same. But if you're in a gym, it probably doesn't make sense to, be not counting, but like if you're doing it competitively, counting those lifts. That makes sense.
Oh yeah, because like ultimately at the end of the day, you need to be doing everything to competition standard, and hitting all like 9 attempts or hitting those kind of PBs in the competition setting it's different, because like, if you go into the gym and just doing squats and you set a PB, like that's completely different to if you're doing squats, bench and deadlift all in the same session.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about like doing a max effort deadlift after doing like a max effort squat and a max effort bench,
Mm-hmm.
All within like 2.5 to 3 hours, that's a completely different set of standards.
So then when you're backstage at the event, are you warming up as well? Like squat, bench, deadlift? Or do you warm up, squat, and then go squat, bench, then go bench, deadlift, then go bench?
Yeah, so you warm up for all your squats first. You get your 3 attempts done, and then there's usually maybe like a 20 to 30 minute break between, squats finishing and then you starting bench.
Okay.
So you kind of take it like lift by lift.
Okay. And when we were chatting earlier and you were talking about peaking for powerlifting, I wanted to ask you what that meant, but I didn't want to dive into it because I wanted to save it for now, because we know peaking for bodybuilding is slightly different. But what did you mean specifically, like you nail your peak? Like what is a powerlifting peak versus a bodybuilding? I suppose, what is a powerlifting peak?
I suppose the whole point of a peak in powerlifting is just to maximize your preparedness for that specific day. So probably the most common way that people do it is they will just start adding in like singles, like heavy singles into their training, like maybe kind of 6 weeks out. So that could look like at the very start of your peak, or 4 to 6 weeks out, for example. So that could look at the very start of the peak, maybe hit something that's like maybe like a second last warm up or a last warm up type lift. The next week maybe go in, hit something that's like an opener. The following week something that's around second attempt. Following week something that could be like a hard second attempt, and then maybe the week after that you might hit your opener again, and then it's competition day. Okay. So like that would just be a very, very simple way that you could look at increasing your preparedness, because you're starting to have an increase in specificity by doing just a single rep, but you're also getting an increase in specificity from the bar load, right? Because like you need to get your nervous system to adapt to express that hopefully weight on the platform too. But then off the back of that, like there's also going to be other things that you're doing. So you're not just doing like a single for your squat training, like you're probably doing a lot of volume as well. Because if you have your volume too low throughout a prep, for example, you could end up detraining. So you might maximize your preparedness to that specific stimulus, but you might not might not have enough kind of fatigue built up to really kind of hang on to it even to the next session of the next week, right? So you want to ensure that you're still doing enough training so that you are accruing some fatigue and like building some degree of kind of adaptations that are going to hang around until you get to your competition day. Because the week before the competition, you're probably going to be deloading or tapering, where you're just having a reduction in volume and intensity, so that you can perform your best on that given day. Because the kind of fine line that you're trying to tread is like making sure you are doing enough, but not doing too little, but also not doing too much.
Yes,
So it can be a tough one to navigate.
And is it just personal preference, or is there like something that works for everybody? Is it literally just through trial and error and seeing what works in terms of volume and certain things for you that you just develop over the time? Or can you predict what someone will need. So it's going to lead us into my next question, which is basically just going to be, someone comes to you, wants to get into powerlifting. Where do you bring them? Like, what does that journey look like? You know, you assess their training, you assess their thing, and then you prepare them for their first show. Like, how long is that journey? Is that a year? Is that 2 years? Or, you know, nowadays I think even with prep coaches are very much, you know, put someone on a bulk for a year, which makes a lot of sense, and that's the right thing to do. But everyone wants to start, don't they? Everyone wants to go. They want to have that short-term goal. You know, it's so hard to predict. 18 months we'll do our first show, or 18 months we'll do our first comp. Is it same in powerlifting, or is it?
I would definitely like to have at least 3 kind of building cycles with somebody before I get them to compete in a show, or sorry, a competition.
Yes.
Mainly just for the reason that I kind of want to see what is going to work for them, because again, like, some people are going to we're probably going to respond to similar things, but not the same thing. You know, a lot of people are going to squat like twice a week, or bench 2 to 4 times a week, or deadlift like once to twice a week. That could just serve as like the very base of a program, for example. But then after that, it's like, okay, well, what's the specific combination of sets and reps that's going to get the best outcomes for this person? And it takes a little bit of a while to kind of figure out, like, even just how much variability there can be in somebody's ability to handle like training volume, for example, ability to handle how many accessories, or even just their own personal preferences. So like, all that stuff does need to kind of be factored into a program before you kind of get them to peak for a competition. Because like, the way I would peak people for competitions is different to how I would have started myself in powerlifting, because at the time when I would have been competing initially, there would have been like a set way for us to do our peak. Like, it was like the peaking program, which was usually different to what we were doing a lot of the other like blocks throughout the year. Whereas like, when I'm working with a client, I'm trying to find what seems to be the block that they seem to respond the best to.
Okay.
And then let's try to lead that into a competition, because we are then going into competition with some degree of certainty that we know that this works for you. That's going to increase their confidence, versus then, and we know what the type of response they might get from that training cycle is going to be, versus what can happen in powerlifting is like, people are like, I'm doing the peak now, the peak, you know, capital T. And then they are like, okay, this peak is going to, like, you know, it's going to yield all this huge results that I've been building up towards like this last year, when it's going to help prepare you for the competition, but it's not going to like add another like 20, 30, 40 kilos to like each lift, right? It's going to be a modest increase, and it should be an increase. But I think people, when they go into the peak, they can just overweight how much results they're going to get from it.
Okay.
You know, and I think that can be a bad thing, because what happens then is like, you end up having worse preparation leading into the meet, because you maybe set a bigger goal than you're realistically able to accomplish on competition day. Then leading into the competition, you're making worse training decisions during the week. You're picking bigger numbers that you shouldn't be aiming for. Maybe you're maxing out early and maxing out multiple weeks leading into competition, and that ultimately is going to impact how you perform on that day as well.
So you were saying like, you take a 3 week, you'd like to have someone for 3 blocks. What does those 3 blocks look like? Are they different, or are they just the same with increased numbers and percentages?
Yeah, so like, I generally do like to get people to kind of work through slightly different ones. I do like to get people to work a little bit more on kind of increasing like work capacity and volume tolerance for like maybe like a block, because it kind of gives us somewhere to go from the first block, right? Because like, I try to think about my training blocks like sequences.
Okay.
So not like this one specific block in this moment of time. I'm trying to think about like the next few months of training, you know, and what seems to be like the most logical progression from one to the next. So one could essentially be like, you know, building up their tolerance essentially to volume, how much training stress they can handle, how much they can do without kind of breaking. But then as well, that kind of gives us a little bit of a kind of runway to then play a little bit more with intensity, and as well make sure that they have sufficient level of skill to handle intensity, but as well they're kind of they've gotten used to pushing themselves as well. And then as well, depends on where that person is within their journey too. A lot of times, like when I have somebody come on to me from for powerlifting, they're probably in their beginner to intermediate stage, so they have a lot of muscle mass that they can build. and they probably still need just get better at handling like heavier loads. So maybe starting off with some kind of volume block was probably going to be the best way to do it, and then just based off there, we're going to go into some kind of intensity block, and maybe even a higher intensity block after that one, just to kind of see, okay, what do you tend to respond to the best.
Because as you were saying that, I was thinking, like, because I'm thinking on the spot, because I'm thinking me whenever back to my 18, 19-year-old self, and I think you said it before, we all know best. Do you find it hard, or do you find it that people need to be held back with weights, as in to progress? Or do you find it the opposite way, that they're very, for example, you say, oh, do 100 for 5, and they go do 110 for 5, and they say, well, that's not part of the plan.
Yeah.
There's a reason why I want you to do 100 for 5 versus 110. Do you find that to be something that pops up a lot, or a challenge as a coach?
Oh yeah, sure. Like, geez, I'd know it myself with my own coach. I think it's just, some of it is just down to impatience and wanting to progress faster than you realistically can. I think like the longer you do it, the more at peace you can be with what your rate of progress can be or will be. I think like the longer I do it, the more I'm interested in just trying to build momentum every single week with training versus trying to hit that PR now. Because like ultimately, if you hit a PR tomorrow, like, you know, like, you're just going to look towards the next one, you know. So like, what's the rush? Like, you know, like, and like, is there going to be one that you hit that you're just going to decide to stop training? You know, like, even like, you know, my competition at the weekend, you know, when I hit that like 5-plate squat, I was like, you know, felt good, but I was like, okay, like, what's next, you know? And like, even throughout my training block, my peak leading into it, I was like, oh, it'd be great to hit this, like, you know, early. But I was like, you know, I don't necessarily need to hit it early. Like, I need to just work towards the process of getting to that number, because like, ultimately, they're going to be there if you keep showing up and keep putting the right load in the bar. And I think most people will feel better if they go into the gym and pick the right weight for that day, versus loading that weight, and that weight to either feel way harder than they expect, or for them to miss it. I think both of those two scenarios, even like if one, like the one that moves way harder, even if they do make it, they're probably gonna be like, geez, is that my limit?
Yes.
You know, like, where do I move? Where do I move on from here? You know, versus if you can go into the gym and make better training decisions every day, like, you're gonna get towards those numbers over time. Like, it's a hard one to do, because it's always like, you're always trying to like suppress your ego to a degree. But you know, it kind of comes back to trying to be a little bit more process oriented versus outcome oriented, because like, ultimately, the process will take care of the outcomes, whereas like, if you're over focused on the outcomes, you are probably going to make the process less enjoyable for yourself.
So when you walked away after completing the 280, did you feel like there was a little bit more there that you could have give, like it was a little bit easier? Like, was that more rewarding than it being harder? I don't know, how did it feel, the 280?
It felt good.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, like, I was happy to get my 3 for 3 on squats and, you know, walk away with a PB. But it wasn't like, I didn't like go to the back and be like, oh my god, I can't believe it did that. You know? But like,
it didn't feel as hard as it should have been, or am I right in saying?
No, it felt as hard as
you do.
Yeah, I'd expect it.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, like, you know, people grit their teeth and they grind out a rep, and I'm wondering if it's more rewarding when you just do everything right and you're like, I could have went, you know, another kilo or two if I really wanted to really push it, knowing that that's there. That actually probably would give you more confidence with your next training block, as opposed to if you attempt it and it's like the sun, the moon and the stars, everything had to align for me to hit that rep, and, you know, Shane had to shout at me and slap me in the back, and, you know, we see that down in the gym. I don't know if you get much of that. Is that this is actually a good question. Is that a common thing in abs? You know, like, I mean, busting people on the back of the shoulders, or is that like looked down upon, as in like, guys?
So I suppose when I was trained there, it wasn't very, how to say, over the top at all.
Yeah.
Like, if somebody's going for a PB lift, like, everybody kind of stand around and watch everybody and kind of give somebody support, but there was no, like, you know, people headbutting the wall and like shouting and screaming. Like, there's encouragement, all right, but like, it's not as like psychotic as like you might see some like bodybuilders going to war in a hack squat or something like that, you know. Like, like, it was actually very tame. You know, so anytime I'm like in a gym and I see like you know, bodybuilders giving a large on like leg press. I'm like, I've been around some very, very strong individuals and never seen them fucking get as dramatic as you. Like,
because we do have that down in the gym. Young lads, 16 to 20. Before nearly every lift, smelling salts, slapping the back. Do you know what I mean? To the point of like, guys, like you can't do that every single session.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And then I feel like the novelty or the actual, if it was a method of boosting, because it is, I presume it's boosting your what would be the word?
Sympathetic nervous system.
Yes.
Yeah.
That it would actually go away on the actual day if it was helpful. So using those things could not be as helpful for the comp day because you become dependent on it. It's like, where it's like if you don't have it, it's a case of it's no longer a benefit, it's a necessity just to get through a session. Yeah,
it's like when people become like reliant on a pre-workout, like I'd say, like like, oh, I haven't had my pre-workout today, there's no way I could be able to hit this midweek set of squats. That doesn't really mean anything. Whereas like I think like the more you can, the less control you can give stuff like that, the less of a crutch they can be, and like the more you're able to just rely on yourself. Like throughout my entire prep there, like I didn't use caffeine or pre-workout or anything like that at all. Like
that's insane.
I just didn't really feel the need for it because I was like, I don't know, I'm able to summon the thing inside me when I need it. Like I don't need to rely on external kind of variables to kind of get me in that zone. And I think like for my own self anyway, I've always found that the less hyped I get myself, the better I do, because I'm now able to control my emotions a little bit more and kind of just take my time when it does. Like with lifting, especially powerlifting, so much of it when you're lifting those heavy weights comes down to like very, very small technicalities and very small kind of little things that you're doing in your setup. And with those, like the more hyped you get, like you're more likely to kind of like skip a step, and that will throw you off then, when the weight feels a little bit weird in your back or it's over your chest and it's kind of like feels out of position. You're like, what did I miss? And then just those little small nuances, like they can really make a difference to how the lift goes.
I have this new saying where it's like training, you want to train with like a relaxed aggression. It's kind of like
controlled aggression.
Controlled aggression, that'd be a better way to frame it, because you want to be strong going in, but you don't want to be over the top where it's out of control, so it's somewhat controlled. But appreciate all of the time today. But very quickly before we wrap up, I was going to ask if you were giving yourself advice from 18 when you were getting into powerlifting, what would some of that advice be? Like looking back on your whole journey. When did you get into powerlifting? 10 years?
Oh, I was probably no, not even like 2019.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that was okay. So looking back at that journey, what lessons have you learned? What advice would you give to yourself starting now? If any, sometimes you could have nailed it, but anything like that.
Yeah, I've always said to people that I'm quite glad that I got into powerlifting when I did, because I don't know, there is a massive turnover rate within like juniors and teens in powerlifting because they tend to obsess about it too much.
Okay.
Like the thing that's going to be the most impactful of you becoming like the strongest lifter that you can be is how long you're going to be lifting, not how intense you are right now, because that tends to be the thing. It's like when people are younger, they're way too intense and put too much of their time and energy into this sport, which ultimately, we want to think about, how am I going to maximize the next 15 years of my lifting? Can you keep up the intensity that you're going to do that you have right now, or will it just cause burnout? I've seen lots of juniors burn out, like in my time powerlifting. Don't allow yourself to kind of skip out on like important life experiences for the sake of a sport that is realistically going to give you very little back. It sounds very pessimistic here, but like, there's certain things I would have experienced like when in my early 20s, like in college and all that kind of stuff, that I would not give up for like another 100 kilos in my total.
Yes.
Because like ultimately the extra 100 kilos on my total is like not enriching my life as such. I'm never going to look back and like, a competition and be like, oh, remember that time I hit like whatever my second attempt, but I'm always going to remember like, the fun times I had with my friends, like acting the bollocks on my J1 and like all this kind of stuff. But that's just me. For some people, like that wouldn't be worth it, and you have to really decide where you are like, you know, within your journey, I think you will know very early on if you're going to be like the best of the best, and it's worth like pouring all your time and energy into something. Like, you will know very early on. But if not, like, don't avoid like life experiences for the sake of this hobby, this sport, because it's going to be there for years, for decades potentially. So yeah, I'd say like enjoy it as much as you can, but don't like make it your entire identity. Don't make it your entire life, because there's much more to life than the actual sport of powerlifting.
Like, learn how to include it in part of your life, and
Yeah.
as you know, something that's not controlling it. Because I think when I started the gym, I think very similar. I learned that the hard way. Maybe some people just do have to learn the hard way all the time. They can never be told something. I was all in, and then I had to learn over the last, like, even with business, that it cannot consume. Stress is the number one. That I think I have a thing called idiocarea. It's basically, I just take an antihistamine every 2 days, and it's just like a skin rash.
Yeah.
Only came on through stress. I had it came after I had the shingles. So like, my immune system was just in the ground, and then it's just never gone away. It starts in my head, and you'll see me after about 2 or 3 days, and I'm starting to go, and I'm like, where's the antihistamines? Take it. It goes away. Now, that's hopefully not a long time. Hopefully I manage my stress a little bit better, and that, you know, tends to reverse itself. But no, that's pretty much it. No, I really appreciate obviously you taking the time to come out and do this. We done a little bit of digging, right? And I have a little thank you present for this. I don't know if, did I get it right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Unreal.
So
Thank you very much.
I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, we done a bit of digging. Hopefully I got you the right flavour. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Because I only ran out of performing yesterday.
I was thinking he's going home tomorrow. Would he get it in a suitcase?
Yeah. Well, I was planning on buying a big kind of a check-in one.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well,
Perfect.
no, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Guys, that is episode 5 of the Black Rose podcast. Let us know what you thought. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Shane, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. See you later. Bye-bye.